Pat's been telling us about what it was like in the early and mid 70s, coming to the realization that her middle child, was on the autism spectrum, and a time when there was not the law that there is now to back up the fact that your child is entitled to a free, appropriate public education. And that all started to change, though, for you, and that laws were passed to make it possible for your child to go to school. And not to give away the ending, but Pat, you've already seen that she's somebody who doesn't give up and doesn't go away. But you became instrumental in what happened in the field of education here in Los Angeles, which really influenced the world and continues to. So pick the story up for us here, that you've got your child, and it's time to put him in school and have that work out for the benefit. And what happened?
Okay, well, after he left MPI, Neuropsychiatric Institute at UCLA, they said, we think he will do well in an aphasia program. That was a speech and language program.
Interesting.
Okay. But when we went to do that, the aphasia department could, at that time, say, oh no, he has behaviors, he can't come. Okay. And so they placed him in what they called an EH program, which was a program for children with learning disabilities. Okay. Maybe there were a few behavior problems, but nothing like Christopher had exhibited. And MPI that didn't help at all. It helped in helping me as a parent, because there were classes that I took there in what they call behavior modification, which is really ABA.
Right.
You know.
So in that respect, it was helpful to you because you got information about that and you ate that up. Okay.
And I did. I couldn't. I literally that changed my life.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful.
In how I managed my child, all my life, my children, my husband, everyone.
Yeah.
You know, ABA can be used with anyone.
Absolutely. We talk about that all the time here.
Yes,
it's a great tool.
So I found it to be extremely helpful. So I called the school district, and again was told we don't educate autistic kids, and that they, it wasn't children with autism then, it was autistic kids. And I said, okay. I said, fine. So I called the director of special education that same day.
That's how you roll. You were like, okay,
Exactly.
I'm going right to the top.
Yeah.
I love it.
And I got his assistant, Steve Mark. And Steve said, well, we don't have a program for your child. And I said, my child is now 5.5 years old. He needs school. And the school you sent us to won't take him.
Right.
And I said, you will get back to me this afternoon, or you will be hearing from my attorney in the morning. Of course, I was a housewife. He was an engineer, my husband. We weren't making a lot of money, and it was, I didn't know how I was going to pay for an attorney, but I was willing to do it.
So your mouth was writing checks that you might not have been able to cash.
Correct.
But hey, we all do that from time to time. Got to move and shake. Yep.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And so within 5 minutes, the director called me.
Okay.
And he said, Mrs. Grayson, your child will have a program on Monday morning to go to. It was on a special ed campus, Locrance, that still exists today. That is a special ed campus. I don't know. They closed a lot of them, but I don't think they closed that one.
Okay.
Anyway, it was in an EH classroom, and they were able to do that in those days. Now they would never put learning disabled kids on a special ed campus.
Right.
But then they did. And he was placed in that classroom, and of course I worried because the teacher knew nothing about autism.
Right.
And so I would send her articles, and I would send her information, and I would send her what we were doing at home.
Right.
And I don't think she even cared, because she didn't want him in her classroom. She would call me every day, his behavior's horrible, he doesn't belong here, blah, blah, blah. So I get a call about 2 months into the program. He usually lasted 2 months.
Right.
And from the principal telling me that they were going to have a meeting and that my husband and I both needed to be there.
And you had to know at that point when they asked for your husband, it's the death knell.
Exactly.
Right.
The death march. And I had to really talk turkey to my husband. I said, we have got to stay strong.
Yes.
And tell them, we know that you're going to eventually have to educate this kid and you can't kick him out.
Right.
Find a program for him,
Yeah.
period. But imagine our surprise when we got there and there was a room full of people all smiling. And we weren't going to get this, we can't keep your horrible kid here anymore.
Okay.
And they said, we are going to open up the very first autism class in our district in this school. And it's going to start in January.
Wow.
And he was the very first child IEP'd
Wow.
into the first autism program
Wow.
in LA Unified. Now, that said, the teachers, again, didn't know what they didn't
Yeah.
know, but they knew more than anybody else who
Right.
had been in contact with him.
And were they more willing to read when you gave them articles?
They were open to anything I said. They were wonderful. His teacher
And that's powerful.
Yes, they were wonderful. And as a matter of fact, I have to give it to LA Unified because they went to the Autism Society and said, we would like to meet with a group of your people on a regular basis. Now that we've opened these programs, we want to know what we need to put into these programs. How many children should be in there? How many aides should we have? And so we determined that there should be no more than 6 children in our program. There should be at least 2 aides in the program.
Wow.
And we got it.
So you got to be beginning architects
That's
to
right.
what we scaffolded up to what we
That's
have
right.
now.
Now, did we have any of the interventions that we do today? We didn't have anything. We didn't have teach methodology. They didn't have ABA classes for the teachers. They didn't have any of that. They had behavior modification.
Yeah.
That was something that they did do, but that was about it.
Right.
There wasn't. We didn't have OT, occupational therapy, sensory integration. That was voodoo medicine in those days.
Right.
There was only one person doing it. She was out of Pasadena. I think it was Jean Ayers. I think the Ayers Clinic. And it was very expensive
Yeah.
if you wanted your child to go. And it was far from my house,
Yeah.
even if I could have afforded it.
Right.
But it was voodoo medicine in those days. Today, it's mainstream.
Right.
These kids have huge sensory issues.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
But then,
Yeah.
they didn't address them.
Yeah.
Kids flap, well, they flap.
Right.
They don't know why they flap, they just flap.
Right.
Kids rock, they rock.
Right.
They chew on their, on things.
Right.
Oh, well.
Right.
They're handicapped,
Right.
So
Expectations were different.
exactly, a lot different. And he stayed on the special ed campus for a couple of years, and then they started putting some autism classes on regular campuses, regular ed campuses. So he left Locrance, which was a really cloistered environment for him. And I had a wonderful teacher there. She became my friend. We went to the public school where they opened up this classroom with a teacher who was as rigid and unfeeling as they came. They just did not come more unfeeling. And nothing I said to her made any difference. He wasn't catching on academically like she thought he should. Because he was verbal by then. Bottom line, she didn't want him in her classroom because he was disruptive.
Yeah.
His behavior was difficult.
And he didn't want to do it her way.
Correct.
And I see that all the time with teachers. It's like, well, it needs to be my way.
So she decides that, he needs to go into an MR class, a mental retardation class. And I was not going to let that happen because I knew what those classrooms were like.
Yeah.
They had 15 to 20 children in those classrooms, a teacher that only knew MR, and who they did not know behavior because a lot of those MR kids don't have the behaviors.
Yeah.
And so I said, no, we're not doing that. And I said, we will take you to due process. And I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
And so the due process guy came. I still remember Vic Signorelli came to me, and he said, well, what if we give you a one-to-one to be in that classroom?
Oh.
What if we do that? In those days, I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I said, well, we can try it. I said, still don't think it's going to work, but we can try it. And so he was at the class. I remember that first day because I got called out of my classroom, and because he had was running around the school. Even with the aide, he was running around the school. So I had to leave my classroom, go to his classroom, and get him. And I spoke to the aide, and when I spoke to the aide, I smelled something on her breath, like alcohol. I thought, what? They got this, and she apparently had been a teacher up in San Francisco, but was an aide here. So I was thinking, well, that's good. She's got some qualifications, maybe, right? Not.
No. Huh.
Not. And I picked up my son, and I went to the principal, and I said, your aide has alcohol in her breath, and this is not going to work.
Right.
And so he wasn't there maybe 2 weeks. The teacher said to me at one point, she said, I think he's a genius because he can draw in perspective. And he could. He loved birds at the time. He was obsessing with birds, and he would draw a cage, and then he would draw the bird inside the cage. And she said, no child, at this age can draw in perspective. He must be genius. So she didn't want him there either. I mean, It was just, he doesn't belong here.
I want to stop you, though, because you mentioned being in your classroom.
Oh, yeah, I was an aide in a classroom.
And so at what point did you decide, so you've got this child, and what point did you decide that you were going to go be an aide in a classroom?
Once he was in school, I decided that I wanted to, I was home by myself. I wanted to I wanted to get into the classroom. I wanted to see how special ed classrooms worked.
Yeah.
I didn't want to work with children with autism. I wanted to work with other handicaps, which I did. I said, please don't place me in a class with autistic children because I live with it.
Right.
Right. How I ever managed to do what I did,
right.
I can't even tell you, but I ended up working with nothing but autism at the end of my career.
Exactly.
But
I wanted to, bridge that, so you're now on the site.
Right.
And working in the classrooms, and that
and
had
I'm
not
also
been
going
before.
to school at night.
There you go.
Okay. So I'm managing 3 children, or 2 at the time. Lori was adopted, and so she came to us a bit later.
Okay.
And going to school at night and working during the day. Okay, and I did that for
full plate.
Yeah, full plate.
Full plate.
But I was, I'm one of these energetic people who just needs to be doing and stimulated, and so that's what I did those things.
So there's not going to work. This placement is not going to work.
Right. So I go back to the district and say, now what? We're going to send you back to Locrance, and we'll put him in the upper class at Locrance. And he was there until he was 13. Okay, where he transitioned to high school. Okay, at 13. He was tiny. He was just the smallest kid on the campus in high school at that time. But he went to Miller High School, which was a school for the physically handicapped.
Okay.
But they had an autism class there. And he, unfortunately, it was just an extension of what was going on in elementary school. They had nothing for our kids, nothing that was teaching them self-help skills, life skills, skills that they could use to go to work, like community integration, none of that.
Yeah.
Community-based instruction, none of that. The only, during high school, it was hard because his behavior, kept escalating. And by the way, we didn't discuss when I finally ended up having to place Christopher.
Yeah.
We missed that piece.
Well, and I want to talk about that because I think that's a reality for a lot of families.
Mm-hmm.
After you had said, I'm never ever going to put him in a state, in a hospital situation. Things got to such a point that your husband was the person who said, this isn't working.
This isn't working for me. And I have to say that because he stayed distant from it, he could see it much more clearly than I could. And if I want to say to parents, just remember that your perspective might be different than others in your family because you are too close to the situation, especially if you're doing what I was doing.
And what kinds of behaviors were happening at that point that were causing your husband to say, I can't do this?
Oh, gosh.
Was he violent?
Yes, he was.
Was he hitting you and his
No,
brother and his...
He wasn't hitting anybody.
Okay.
He was destroying everything.
Okay.
He was destroying our home, chairs, windows, doors. There were holes. There was a hole in every door in my home.
And you were all, I'm sure, experiencing the stress of not knowing when a bomb was going to go off in your home.
Exactly. We just didn't know. And he was up during the night, and I would have to get up and because he would empty out the refrigerator and just do.
It was chaos.
Chaotic, and we lived in chaos.
And your husband said, I can't do this.
I can't do it anymore.
If either he has to go or I have to go, essentially. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yes, exactly. That's what he said to me one
And
night.
were you resentful in that moment?
I was
Did
very
you feel
angry.
like you were between a rock and a hard place and it was like Sophie's choice?
Extremely angry.
Yeah.
Extremely angry. I was.
I don't see how you couldn't be.
Yeah.
But you chose
I would say
the unthinkable.
How do you know you're not in it?
Right.
You're not having to deal with it. And he
Right.
said, I have to see it.
Yeah.
And that's, and I see what it's doing to our children.
Yeah.
And
But so you did place him.
we put him in a group home in about 10 minutes from our home.
Uh-huh.
With two professionals, a special ed teacher and a MFC, a man who was just gotten his license, therapist. And I thought, these people really know what to do, and gosh, maybe I just am not skilled enough behavior in the area of behavior to manage my child.
Yeah.
And so he was placed when he was 11 into this very small group home. There were only 4 beds in this home. And these children, and he was the first one, so they gradually added 3 more.
And did you, when you finally agreed and the first night that he was there, what was more, the relief or the guilt?
The guilt. Oh my gosh. And I felt like my heart was being torn out of my chest.
Yeah.
Just the hardest thing I ever did in my whole life. That truly.
And did you find the place, or did somebody help you to find the place?
Actually, Christopher's teacher from Lowcrantz, who we had become friends, and she knew my struggles. She was friends with these people.
Okay.
And she called me up and she said they're looking to open up a group home, a small group home with higher functioning kids with autism.
Okay. Okay.
And so they did.
Okay.
And that was a miracle. It was really a miracle.
And did you get to a point where you got to experience the relief, or did you stay in the guilt?
I still feel guilty. I'm not sure it was the best thing for him, but it certainly was the best thing for my family.